Okay, hello everybody. Uh, don't be
Hey,
don't be ridiculous. Episode 25. Jeremy and Clark here with you. It is Sunday about 5:30. So if some blockbuster move happens, don't hate us for not getting it right.
yeah, we're not trying to be breaking news here.
That's right. That's right. So
Go to Twitter.
that's right. That's right. There's plenty of outlets where you can get that. Yeah. So first thing we want to do is review the conference championship games last week. We've got the Bengals and the Rams in the Super Bowl, which should be a pretty exciting game.
Should be a
And
good game. I don't think anyone really expected the Bengals to be there, but um, yeah, like we were saying the whole year, like in the NFC, you could have made a case for Green Bay, Tampa Bay, the Rams, maybe Arizona at one point, maybe Dallas at one point. So it's kind of not surprising. I mean, the Rams that were all in this year to try to get here. So it was kind of weird that San Francisco gets ahead again, and they basically it was at the end of that game was hilarious because we were texting each other and they were both trying to give it away, you know, like Stafford tried to throw a game-ending interception. The guy did well. It wouldn't have been a game-ending interception, but I mean, it would have been a really big interception. The guy dropped it, and then San Francisco, Garoppolo throws one and the guy catches it. So that was pretty much the difference in the game. I mean, the Rams probably should have been ahead, because they'd seemed like they were moving the ball pretty easily, but they couldn't finish drives. So
yeah, so let's do the AFC Championship first. My takeaway from that game is what the hell happened to Kansas City?
well, from what so I mean, there's a lot of ways we could go with this. I was listening to Carson Palmer on the Dan Patrick show, and he was saying that in the first half, it seemed to him like Mahomes was just kind of taking what the defense was giving, you know, and doing a really good job of that. I mean, they scored 21 points. Um, And yeah, in the second half, he was holding on to the ball and he was trying to make stuff happen and he wasn't taking what was there. And also, they weren't running the ball. But I don't think you can necessarily be surprised when a team coached by Andy Reid doesn't run the ball because he doesn't like to run the ball. So that kind of, I think that's kind of what I mean. Yeah, there were several plays where he was just holding on to the ball, running around, moving around. It's like, dude, just run with it or throw the ball, throw it away or throw it to somebody. Like, come on. So it seemed like that pretty much sort of summed it up. I mean, he was doing that. The Bengals made some plays, and then I guess they sort of got after him. They switched to dropping 8 guys into coverage. um and I guess Kansas City wasn't ready for that, or they didn't want to just take what the defense was giving them. I don't know. Like, that was kind of crazy.
Yeah, the Chiefs got up 21-3, and it looked like okay, this is another Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl again. And then right before halftime, they had the huge blunder where they throw the ball behind the line. There's 5 seconds left, and instead of kicking a field goal, they try to score, but they throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage, and he gets tackled, and they get no points. And
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have a problem with them. And a lot of people were saying, well, you just kicked the field goal with 5 seconds. Well, you can run one play and still be able to kick a field goal. I mean, basically, it's like you snap the ball, you read, and then you either you throw into the end zone to try to one of your receivers, or you throw it out of the back of the end zone. The ball probably would have landed. They would have had a second or two, and they could have kicked a field goal. But there can't be a read. Oh no, and then throw to this guy. Like you can't. I don't know if that was the actual design of the play, but if that was the design of the play, that's terrible. You can't, with 5 seconds, the ball needs to go into the end zone or you need to throw it away like immediately. So, but the thing is, people are saying, oh, that sort of turned things around. And I'm like, I mean, I guess, but the Bengals got the ball coming out of halftime and they didn't do anything with it. And so both the teams kind of went back and forth, not doing anything with it at first. So I don't know, how much of an effect that had on it.
yeah, I give some credit to the Bengals defense. They did a nice job in the second half, but the Chiefs literally like it was very strange to watch. Mahomes just hold the ball, and it didn't make any sense to me. I mean, you have to make adjustments in a game, and they needed to run the ball a little bit. And the thing is, they had the lead. It's not as if the game was in danger that they needed to throw the ball, and for some reason it was a really really poor job by the Chiefs, and yeah,
Yeah, I give the Bengals credit, but yeah, I'm more on the side of that was. I mean, it's a combination of the two, but I'm more on the side of the Chiefs kind of blew that game. They should have won that game.
yeah, and you and I have been harping on this all season that there's nothing wrong with 3 points. Take the
Yeah,
field goal, and the Chiefs again passed up on 3 points there at the end of that first half, and they lose the game by three. So I don't know how many times that has to happen this season before.
well, the Bengals kicked 12. We were texting each other after the game. The Bengals kicked like 12 field goals throughout the playoffs, and they're in the Super Bowl. So
Yeah,
just goes to show don't get too over the top. Don't get too greedy. Just take the 3 points.
and at the end of the game, the end of regulation anyway, when the Chiefs were down near the end zone, and I feel like we've now gotten way too into this. We're turning this into a football or a video game now, where it's just, oh well, you don't want to score too quickly. Well, run the ball here, but oh don't. How about just score the touchdown? Like Kansas City should have scored it. They had first and goal. They should have scored a touchdown where they had three chances to score. They should have gotten one. Instead, they had to kick a really long field goal because of how much of a disaster they were on offense. So
Yeah, well, remember Mahomes. Everyone's going to forget it. Mahomes fumbled at the end. They sacked him and he fumbled, and Cincinnati couldn't recover. If they'd recovered that, they would have won in regulation. You know. So the other thing that was funny is that now it's basically like I guess overtime is fine now because Cincinnati got the ball after Mahomes threw an interception, so both teams got the ball, so no one's complaining.
right,
which I mean, I guess that's fine. I mean, like I said, I think there's some legitimate criticisms of the overtime, especially in the playoffs. But I don't know. It's just kind of like I think this if the statistics were a little more evened out between who gets the ball first and who doesn't, then I don't think people would have as much of a problem with it. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, Cincinnati made a good. The guy made a great catch to get the interception, but I don't know why he's throwing. I mean, it's third and long, but I don't know why Mahomes is throwing that into double coverage like that. It just seems like Mark Schlereth was talking about this on. He was on a few things, but he was just saying maybe it was football hubris where they were just like, well, we could run the ball or we could take what the defense has given us, but no, we don't want to win that way. It's like, okay. So
yeah, it is crazy comeback. I mean, I wrote down in my notes: is Cincinnati a Cinderella? I mean, is this a Cinderella NFL team? I mean, I'm not saying they're not good, but they beat they beat the Raiders, they beat Tennessee, and then they beat the Chiefs.
it's not like they've been like really, really overwhelming against anybody. I mean, every game was close. I mean, every game was one score. I mean, the Raiders had the ball. I mean, they technically, Carr might have been able to throw a touchdown and like tie the game. So that might have gone to overtime. And then Tennessee, it was 3 points. So, and then this one was also 3 points in overtime. So yeah, they haven't like overwhelmed anybody, but they're just kind of, Burrow threw an interception in this game. I'm trying to remember. Did he throw an interception in the Tennessee game? I feel he might have, but yeah, but it's basically like they haven't made really, really huge mistakes. And they're just sort of hanging around. They kick field goals. Their defense starts to make some plays. And Burrow hasn't been unbelievable, but he's just, he makes some play. I mean, he got away from the rush a few times against Kansas City. So, yeah, they're just kind of, I mean, that's why I'm like, I don't know how are they going to do that against Aaron Donald and Von Miller, So,
yeah, so we'll get to that. So the in the NFC game, it felt like in the first half the Rams were completely outplaying them and they were behind.
yeah.
And then the 49ers, as I've been saying the entire season, can't play 4 good quarters. They have a 10-point lead going into the fourth quarter, can't hold it.
Yep.
Can't hold the lead and can't score. And in this game, it's just crazy. I don't know how the 40 I think we got to give Kyle Shanahan, and I know people are complaining about his win-loss record, but I think we got to give him some credit. They couldn't run the ball in this game. They got Jimmy Garoppolo, trying to throw the ball to the other team every other play, and they almost go to the Super Bowl. So I don't know how the game. Honestly, the Rams should have won that game easily. They're the better team. They have more talent. Um,
Yeah.
and I got to give Stafford credit. In the Tampa game and in this game, didn't make. I mean, he made the one throw that should have been intercepted. But other than that, he's been really solid.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could kind of argue he probably would have had a better career if he wasn't in Detroit all those years,
Yeah,
or if Detroit had ever gotten, a legit coach. Like he has a legit coach now, and it's like, okay. I mean, he still led the league in interceptions this year, but I mean, I guess we'll get to that later. But you could argue, say if Stafford wins the Super Bowl, or if he wins the Super Bowl and has a few more really good years with the Rams, then you could argue he should be in the Hall of Fame. Even if he doesn't win the Super Bowl this year, like if he has a few more really good years, like you might, people might say, Hall of Famer. So yeah, he's pretty good. He's in a much better situation now. The Rams. The Rams kind of concern me because, like I said, the Bengals aren't overwhelming, but I feel like Stafford could make a huge mistake. I mean, he almost did in the 49ers game. The guy just didn't catch it. So I'm more concerned about that from the Rams than I am from the Bengals, because Burrow throws interceptions every now and then, but he hasn't done anything really backbreaking throughout the playoffs.
yeah,
So
and just before we get to the Super Bowl preview, Sean McVay tried every way he could to blow that game for the Rams.
okay,
He used up all their timeouts.
yeah,
The two challenges were terrible. They
right,
had no chance of getting overturned. It was one of those things where it was just like McVay acted like he was coaching a different game. Like the Rams were playing in this game, but McVay was coaching as if it was a different game because he's going for it on fourth down in the second half. They don't get it. San Francisco ends up scoring because of it. Like he basically, if they had lost this game, McVay would have taken a lot of shit because he really self-destructed, and in that game. I don't know what was going on. He looked like he was insane on the sideline. So
remember they were up 27-3 against Tampa Bay, and it all fell apart. They almost blew that.
yeah,
So yeah, I think if you're a Rams fan, you have to. That's probably in the back of your mind. Like, are they gonna kind of blow this game? So
yeah. So what's your feeling on the Super Bowl?
I mean, I guess you should favor the Rams, but it's one of those things where they concern me a little bit with, some of the decisions McVay makes, with Stafford possibly throwing an interception. Is Cam Akers going to start fumbling the ball? Is some weird stuff going to happen? Like, I don't know. So I guess you favor them, but I mean, Cincinnati somehow has figured out a way to get here. Like, I don't know. Their offensive line's still not very good. So if they can run the ball, though, because I guess the Rams against the run aren't as good as they are against the pass. So I guess if you can run the ball, then maybe things will work out. It'll be interesting. It might be one of those games where we get later into it and it's like, all right, who wants to win this game? Who's going to make a play? And we're just kind of waiting around for somebody to do something. So it seems, hopefully it's a good game. I think it has a potential to be a good game. But yeah, I mean, the Rams probably should go into this thinking we should win this game. If we're on our game and playing as well as we can, we should win, because they have more talent.
Yeah,
it's pretty clear to me that they're the more talented team.
yeah, and they are favored in the game. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the matchup for me comes down to the Rams' defensive line against the Bengals' offensive line, and if their defensive line plays like they did against San Francisco, it's going to be really tough for the Bengals to beat them, because the Bengals can't run the ball as well as San Francisco can, and it's an issue. And it was an issue for the Bengals against Tennessee, and Kansas City doesn't have as good a pass rush as Tennessee or the Rams do. So they're going to deal with a different animal in this game. But that being said, Stafford will throw the ball to the other team at least once. It just depends on whether they catch it or not.
Yeah,
And
Cincinnati's going to have to. They're going to have to. They're going to have to steal a possession. or two, maybe. I mean, just to kind of flip things and give themselves more of an advantage. So yeah, but the thing is, what's funny is like the Rams almost I feel like have more of a margin for error because they can just Stafford can make a big play with Odell Beckham, he can make a play with Cooper Kupp, like that they might be able to run the ball, like so yeah.
Yeah, you've seen it in these playoffs when the Rams have needed a play, Stafford has delivered it for them.
Right.
So,
Right.
I hope it's a good game, and I think if I'm pulling for the Rams, I need them to be up double digits in the second half. If this game's close in the fourth quarter, I kind of like Cincinnati. Cincinnati's got some kind of momentum, mojo, whatever you want to say. They have
Yeah.
something, and the Rams have almost blown,
Yeah.
these playoff
Maybe
games.
of averages, the Rams will have a good fourth quarter. Like I don't know,
Right.
So
Yeah. So I think we're pretty lucky. This has been a pretty much wide open playoffs. I mean, I wouldn't have predicted Bengals against the Rams in the Super Bowl, and I don't think most other people would either.
yeah, well, I mean, and remember the Chiefs. They probably should have lost to the Bills. I mean, the Bills probably could have,
Right. That's
really
kind of what I thought.
that AFC Championship game. Going, are you kidding me? We could have destroyed the Bengals.
Yeah. That's kind of what I thought. When that game went into overtime, and I thought, you know what, the Chiefs should have lost last week to Buffalo. So the fact that they're in another overtime game, like,
well, what did you think about this talking point started getting passed around a little bit? That Mahomes is never going to win another Super Bowl. And I'm just like, all right, just like slow down. Like he's still really good. They had a really good year. They lost in overtime. Like, come on, slow down. Like, was Mahomes maybe trying to do a little too much? Yeah, but I mean, they were still up 21 to. If Kansas City's defense had tackled Burrow a couple of those times and didn't let him escape, then maybe we're talking about the Chiefs in the Super Bowl again. So, everybody needs to kind of slow. I mean, granted, there is a lot that goes into winning a Super Bowl, and there is a lot of luck and a lot of different things that play into it because it's really difficult. So, like, is it possible that he might never? I mean, yeah, sure, but I mean, you're telling me they're not going to be right there with all these other teams in the AFC, like, I mean, like for instance, the Bengals, like it'd be great for them to win the Super Bowl this year, but like I think the onus is more on the Rams because of the way they've been all in this year. The Bengals, their offensive line isn't even that good. They still need to build that up, and they probably need more playmakers on offense and defense too. So they're not the fully realized vision of the Bengals that you would expect to be in the Super Bowl. So, but yeah, the whole what did you think of that Mahomes talking point?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that they lost that game. I just feel like but that being said, that's 4 straight AFC Championship games. I mean, Brady went to 14.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, he wouldn't. The idea that he wouldn't get more opportunities to even get to the Super Bowl, I think, is ridiculous. But it is kind of like, do you view it as kind of an underachievement that they've won one Super Bowl in the last 4 years? Considering like they lost the AFC Championship game to the Patriots because the guy lined up offside, and then last year, I mean, they had some injuries on the offensive line, but and then this year, like, they probably should have won that game. So it's kind of like, I feel like if they'd gotten 2, then it'd be like, okay, great, but you only get 1 out of this. I mean, granted, you got 1, that's great, but it does kind of feel like, if people are talking about can Mahomes like catch Brady in Super Bowls or catch him in terms of the debate about who's the greatest quarterback, that's really disappointing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that's going to be a battle in the AFC. You can see it. Mahomes, Allen, Joe Burrow, and Justin Herbert. It seems like it's going to be really hard to get back there, especially in the division that they're in.
Right.
So it seems like it's going to be a challenge. Is it an underachievement? I don't know. I feel like I guess when they lost to the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, I guess that's a little bit of a
that's pretty.
That's kind of the rough one. I mean, last year against Tampa, they weren't going to beat Tampa no matter what they did. And this year it just caught up to them. Like you could see it. They probably should have lost to Buffalo, and it doesn't surprise me that they lost the next week. You know what I mean? It's hard to. It's just it's really hard to do. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not into the disappointment thing, but I do think they will get other opportunities when you have a quarterback that good and you have a coach that good.
I mean, it would have been more disappointing if they didn't even get one.
Right.
That would have been horrible. Not getting two, you can quibble over that, but they had four pretty good opportunities. They got one, so that's how difficult it is to win the Super Bowl. So
yep. So we had a major bombshell this week in the NFL. The former Dolphins coach, who was just recently fired, has filed a lawsuit against the NFL that alleges that there is discrimination in hiring practices. And I mean, on the face of it, the cause that he's seeking seems to be pretty noble.
Well, like I was going to say, the main thing is, does he have a point? I think he has a point. Yep. But I do think it's complicated. I think sometimes some of the coverage has been a little slanted one way, like, oh, this is absolutely horrible. And I'm like, no, he has a point, but it depends, when you start analyzing individual decisions that get made about who got hired, it's kind of like, yeah, I can see a problem here, but then there's this, and that, there's a variety of things going on. So it's hard to really say, that it's just, well, there's 32 or 31, racist owners or racist GMs or something, because there's African-American general managers too. So,
yeah, I definitely think the NFL's hiring practices are a problem. There's definitely an issue there, but a lot of the main stuff that was brought out in this lawsuit seems to be for publicity or to generate attention, because one of the claims is that the Dolphins owner tried to pay him $100,000 per game to lose in 2019.
Yeah.
And I mean, my first thought on that is, I mean, listen, the Dolphins tried to cheat and they still can't do it right. They still can't figure this out.
They can't even cheat. Yeah.
They can't even do that. The Patriots have been cheating forever and mostly get away with it. But the Dolphins can't figure this out. It just blows my mind. But that's sensational, but I'm not sure what that has to do with the main point of the case. John Elway showing up to a job interview, I guess hungover or tired or whatever.
Yeah. So what I thought that was interesting. Like, the claim that Brian Flores made, I'm like, okay, I can see how that could possibly happen, And he said that they were like 45 minutes late to the interview, and then Elway said that they were flying all night because they had an interview in Denver, and then they had to fly overnight on a private jet to New England or to Rhode Island, I think, because the Patriots were getting ready to play the Super Bowl. This was 3 years ago,
right?
So his claim was that they were only on a few hours of sleep, but they were giving him they were taking the interview seriously. It was in good faith. They had every interest in getting to know him a little bit better to see if he would be the guy that they would hire as their head coach. So it's plausible. His explanation of that is plausible. I don't really, and the problem is, how do you determine when an interview isn't really in good faith? And even the thing with the Giants,
that's how you decide an interview is not in good faith. When somebody texts you 3 days before you interview and says, "I heard this guy got the job."
Right. Yeah. Well, but see, here's the thing. Even with that, I mean, it would be naive to think that, like, when a owner or general manager fires a coach, that they don't already have maybe a guy that they want in mind, but they're still going to interview people to kind of see if, is this really the guy we want, or is, whatever else. I mean, like, for instance, if they had Brian Daboll in mind and then they interviewed him and the interview didn't go well, they might have hired somebody else. So to me, it's just more complicated. Now, I can understand being Brian Flores being kind of humiliated. Well, he said he was humiliated because he gets that text and it's like, oh, I don't even, why am I going to go interview for this job when it's already been given to somebody else? Which I totally get that. And then this week, like reading and listening to a lot of stuff, other black head coaches have said that this is kind of a frustration they've had with the Rooney Rule, where they feel like some of these interviews are just sham. Like Marvin Lewis was talking about this, where he, when he was trying to, when Carolina was searching for a head coach after they got rid of Ron Rivera, and Marvin Lewis had been fired, so he was, I guess he had heard some media reports that the Panthers were leaning toward hiring somebody, and then he's like, well, he's talking to like his agent or somebody else, like, well, why am I going to go interview? And it's like, well, you get your name out there, you interview, you meet more people, whatever. So it's kind of a thing where like you feel like the interview's a sham, but you go through it anyway just to make some connections or whatever. Yeah. Again, it's complicated. I understand the frustration with that because why do you want to go through a sham interview? That sucks. I totally get it. And there's been some decisions that are made that just don't make any sense. Like the one that I keep going back to is Adam Gase was the coach of the Dolphins for 3 years, and he was terrible. He came in, the Dolphins were bad. They made the playoffs 1 year, but they beat a bunch of bad teams, and then they got destroyed in the playoffs by the Steelers, right? So then anyway, he gets fired. 5 minutes later, he gets hired by the Jets. Why the hell are you rehiring that guy? Why does he get a second chance? He was terrible. So you see things like that, and then you see one that I keep coming back to was Jim Caldwell was the coach of the Lions, and they had like 2 winning seasons in a row on the Lions. Okay, and then they fired him and they hired Matt Patricia, who had never been a head coach before. Jim Caldwell had been a coach in Indianapolis before. So you fire him and then you hire Matt Patricia, and Matt Patricia was terrible. They ended up firing him. So it's just things like that. I'm like, that would be frustrating to me if I was a head coaching candidate. Just especially if you're one that has experience and all that. But again, it's complicated because I know I'm ranting right now. I'll just say this point, and then you can go ahead. But like Byron Leftwich was up for being considered for the Jaguars job. Great, he used to be the quarterback there. He's been an offensive coordinator for a few years now, and I guess he was apparently a top candidate. But then he didn't want to work with the general manager in Jacksonville because there's been reports that guy's been a huge douchebag. Which that's fine. That's your prerogative if you don't want to work with that guy. But he took his name out of consideration. Which, hey, you can just decide who you want to work with. You can decide what jobs you want to take. That's fine. But I feel like then that's going to get spun into, if no black head coaches get hired during this hiring cycle, people are going to be like, well, what the hell? And it's going to be like, well, I mean, there might have been 2, but he took his name out, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that. But yeah, I don't know. You can
I think, well, first of all, there's a good argument to be made. Some of these teams are too stupid to be racist, which is
yes,
it's a fair argument because some of these teams are just too dumb to be able to figure out how to even, but yeah, I think Flores should have been hired. I think that
he still might. I mean, I'm saying might be. That's got to be like a caveat to that because I don't. His career is probably over based on the fact that he filed that lawsuit. But we'll see. I mean, the Saints still haven't hired anybody, and the Texans still haven't hired anybody. So
the Dolphins still haven't either. Obviously, he's not getting the Dolphins job. I think Flores should have been hired. I think it's kind of ridiculous that he wasn't. But so as we've talked about before, these NFL teams they're bad for a reason. Most of these teams they don't know how to hire a coach anyway, no matter what color they are. I do think there's some merit to what Flores is talking about with these sham interviews. But it just kind of I'm pulling for Flores. I like him. I think he's a good guy. I hope that this gets somewhere. I hope his coaching career isn't over. But this feels to me like it was kind of thrown together. Because it was only 10 days from when the Giants interview to when he filed the lawsuit. So it just doesn't. This doesn't feel like they've really spent the time
Well, and it's the whole deal is that for this to be successful, they're counting on other coaches. It's a class action. They're counting on other ones joining the lawsuit. And I don't know, like one of the things that you'll see with like for instance with wage and out like unpaid overtime class action lawsuits. Some law firms will literally just, they'll write up the lawsuit quickly. They'll interview some former employees or whatever who allege they didn't get overtime. You write up the lawsuit and then you file it, and then you just see who's going to join. Because if you filed a bunch of these, it doesn't take you that long to get up the paperwork and file it. So you file it and you see who joins. If enough people don't join after a while, you just you move on. You do another one. you know. But I don't know, I don't know how many people are going to join this, because that if you join this, you're probably ending your coaching career, because people are just, it's fucked up, but it's like, that's what happens. Like if you file a lawsuit against an employer, then your reputation gets destroyed, because they're basically like, oh, well, this person's a troublemaker. Nobody wants to hire you. Right. And that's fucked up and wrong, because you want whistleblowers to step up and say stuff so employers get held accountable. But that's just kind of the way it goes.
Yeah, there's actually a better shot of the Dolphins owner getting in trouble for trying to pay for losses in games than there is of Flores really getting substantial things out of the the racist hiring practices part of this.
Yeah, and I don't know how you prove that offer was made, because it's just hearsay at this point.
Well,
it's Flores saying this happened, Ross saying no, it didn't, unless someone else heard it or it was written down somewhere.
Well, interesting story about that. So Cameron Wolf, who works for the NFL Network, put out a story a few days ago that said that there is a witness that can corroborate what Flores is saying. That story was up for about a day, and then it disappeared.
Okay.
So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now, it is a federal crime to try to fix a sporting event. Now, that is going to be really hard to prove, because you have to prove that, and you really got to prove that in court. But Stephen Ross can still get into a lot of trouble with the NFL anyway. But if there is a witness, now we're having a different discussion. But the reporter who works for the NFL Network, his story was taken down. Wonder how that works. So anyway, but this is a perfect lead into my point here. I was reading a little bit about what's going on with the Washington football team and their mess. And apparently the NFL and Daniel Snyder agreed to not release any findings unless they both agreed to release it. So they did an investigation. They gave a report on it. Listen to this. So they gave a report on it, not on paper. They gave an oral report on this to the NFL, so that there was no documentation of it. Okay, so that way, and there's something called I forget what it's called, but it's called a conflict interest or a something agreement that the Washington team and the NFL came to, that said they would not release anything unless both sides agree to release it. So basically, they did this entire investigation and they can just hide all the stuff that happened.
Yeah.
So if those of you not familiar with the Washington football team, they didn't have an HR department. So there was allegations of sexual harassment of their cheerleaders, and using their cheerleaders as prostitutes, and all kinds of misogynistic and disgusting things that are way beyond.
He didn't lose his team.
Right, and that's it. Right, and that's another good point. So all of that went on. So it underlines my point, and I've said this before. The NFL does not care about anybody. They don't care about any of this stuff. They don't care who does wrong. You have to
remember the NFL. They're not really. There's an office on Madison Avenue, but the owners own the NFL. It's not, the NFL doesn't have subpoena power with the owners in terms of when they're investigating and stuff. So
Yeah. So listen, like everybody who getting all up in arms, like the NFL is going to do something about this. The NFL will not do anything unless Congress gets involved. And the only reason this Washington football team investigation has become a big deal is because Congress is involved now. Now, the Republicans they don't want to do any of this. They don't want this to go on. The Democrats do. So unless Congress jumps in and says the NFL, you need to fix this and this and this. I hate to say it, but I don't think they're going to change anything.
Well,
because
the thing you have to remember though is like with hiring, things can be cyclical. There were like 7 or 8 minority coaches just a few years ago, right? And now there's only one. Well, some people got fired. Like things could. Doug Gottlieb made this point he was talking about, because he's obviously a college basketball fan, and he was talking about in the Pac-12. They've, in the last several years, they've had several minority coaches, but some different ones got fired and stuff. So now they don't have any. But that doesn't mean there won't be some in the future.
There will be, but the NBA has 14.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah. It's not like this is like yes, I understand the cyclical argument, but this is it's a bit ridiculous in the NFL.
There's guys who have experience who, don't get considered, or, whatever else. And it's like when the Cardinals, they had Steve Wilkes, who was African American, and they fired him after 1 year. And then they hired a college coach with, I don't know if he had any NFL coaching experience, who had a losing record in college at Texas Tech. So, that's kind of ridiculous. But then the thing you got to remember is, like, for instance, we were at the beginning of the hiring cycle, we were like, why aren't people considering Doug Peterson more? He won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Let me repeat that. He won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Okay. So, but he did end up getting hired by the Jaguars. So, like, yeah, there's coaches who are like, why aren't you hiring this guy? Why are you hiring this dude who's never been a coach before?
And by the way, the Jaguars interviewed everybody. They interviewed like 15 people. Like they interviewed every coach that was out there. Like, we can bash some of these teams like the Giants for being ridiculous, but the Jaguars should be given some credit. They interviewed every candidate that there was.
Okay.
So that was pretty incredible. Yeah, I don't understand how Doug Peterson I don't understand what took so long. I really don't.
Yeah.
No idea. Like, they won't, and that being said, and they won't hire Eric Bieniemy from the Kansas City Chiefs. Because he's their offensive coordinator, but the argument is, well, he doesn't call the plays. Well, Doug Peterson used to be in that role, and Matt Nagy used to be in that same role, and they both had head coaching jobs.
Hackett was in that role too.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, again, that one I don't the only thing I'll say about that is he was a former running back, and I don't know of a lot of examples of former running backs who were NFL head coaches, but yeah, I mean, he's been interviewed a bunch of times. Again, though, I don't know. Like, I don't know how those interviews go. I know that there's kind of a thing that I think minority coach, I've heard that they get frustrated with, is that there's the interview didn't go well, or it wasn't what we were looking for, or whatever. I mean, Tony Dungy was talking about that. And he actually I wanted to make sure I got this. Tony Dungy was on the Dan Patrick show. He made a really good point. He said that I don't think it does anybody any good to be doing these interviews while the playoffs are still going on, because I remember Peter King made the point that a lot of times the coaches who get hired are the offensive and defensive coordinators of the teams that get far into the playoffs. For whatever reason, that's just the way it is. That's how they hire people. But Tony Dungy was saying that kind of does everybody a disservice, because in order for you, if you're on a staff of a team that's competing in the playoffs, you're trying to prepare for a team, but then you're trying to prepare like, oh, I might get this coaching job. And it's like, Dungy made the point that, like, well, if we end this after the season, if you give me a week, I'll have much more to say about your roster and what we can do with the different players you have there, and what other players should we bring in if I have more time to do that. So I do think that's I kind of agree with that. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. Same thing with college. They should probably delay some of this hiring stuff and make them do it, after the season. It probably would be better for everybody.
Because it's just hard to like switch gears when you're like so locked in trying to prepare for one team, whether it's the conference championship or the Super Bowl or whatever. Like, the other thing was with the Flores interviewing with the Broncos, they had like 3 hours, right? But some of these other candidates, like, weren't in the playoffs. They might spend the whole day with the team. And it's like, well, that's kind of not, you only get 3 hours but this guy gets, half a day with the team. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So the overall thing is I definitely think there's a point. It's complicated, but unfortunately, I don't know how much is going to happen because of this lawsuit. I really don't.
Yep.
Be too cynical about it, but
All right. Let's get to the good stuff. So Clark and I had a little bit of an argument texting the other day. So as we all know, Ben Roethlisberger recently announced his retirement. It was one of those things everybody kind of knew that was probably what was going to happen. So, it brings up this debate now that all the quarterbacks of the 2004 draft class are retired. That would be Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, and Eli Manning. You made a statement that I disagreed with. And so we were talking about quarterbacks getting into the Hall of Fame. You brought up Matthew Stafford, and I thought that Ben Roethlisberger would get in, maybe not on the first ballot because the NFL Hall of Fame is difficult. There's only like 50 writers, and you have to get 35 of them. It's not easy, and you're almost going against other players because there's like rounds to it. It's not like in baseball where it's just you put in a ballot and that's it. So it's hard to get in. So I thought Ben Roethlisberger would probably get in, maybe not on the first ballot. And then you said Ben Roethlisberger should be a Hall of Famer, but Eli isn't. So explain yourself.
First of all, let me preface this by saying I don't think Kurt Warner should be in the Hall of Fame. Okay, so I don't want to get too far into the longevity thing because I think that is part of being a Hall of Famer, but I'm more interested in what you were at your peak, but your peak can't be really short-lived or like intermittent. Like Kurt Warner, it was like not in the league and then really good and then can't hold on to the ball and can't stay a starter, and then he still can't stay a starter, and then he gets an opportunity, and then his team goes 9-7, and they make the Super Bowl because he plays the Carolina Panthers in the divisional round, and Jake Delhomme essentially melts down and throws like 4 interceptions, So because he made 3 Super Bowl appearances, won an MVP, and won Super Bowl, we're supposed to put him in, even though there's this whole stretch where he was just bad in the middle of his career, So Eli Manning, if you take away the 2 years that he made the Super Bowl, even the years that he made the Super Bowl, like the first year he made the Super Bowl, he wasn't that great during the regular season. He was pretty good in the playoffs. But, I mean, even in this, like in the Super Bowl, they were behind 7-3 for most of the game. Okay. And then, I mean, he tried to throw the game away on that last drive, and the Patriots player didn't catch the ball. And then he gets away from those defenders and chucks the ball into the middle of the field. That probably should have been intercepted, but the guy made an unbelievable catch, and then it was basically like you really look at all the years that he was a quarterback, it was just this very he had a couple of years where it was like, okay, he was really good that year. But for the most part, it was like if they didn't make the playoffs, like they just weren't that good. And I just look at the Steelers, I look at Roethlisberger, and I'm like, for me, it was much more consistent, for Eli Manning. And it's like, well, the Steelers, they had all those receivers. It's like the Giants had Tom Coughlin. They had plenty of receivers. They had plenty of talent on those teams. Like he would start off a year good, and then it would all kind of fall apart, or they would get to the playoffs and then he would suck, I mean, so it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, you're going to take those 2 years and that's it. You're making him a Hall of Famer based on that.
Okay, so I don't have a problem with your Kurt Warner argument. I understand where you're coming from. The bottom line is he's in, so we can't. It's not your personal Hall of Fame. It's the Hall of Fame. And you look at their numbers; they're pretty much the same. They're both top 10 in passing yards. They're both, they both have. You look at their career stats, regular season, playoffs. They're pretty darn close. And so my argument isn't that I understand everything you're saying about Eli, but if you're going to put Ben in, then you got to put Eli in. There's no possible way. There's no possible way to separate them. You can say Ben's better than Eli if you want, but it's by inches. You look at Eli was 8-3 in the playoffs. Ben Roethlisberger was 11-6. Yes, Ben Roethlisberger made the playoffs more, but Ben Roethlisberger had 16 years where they had a top 10 defense. He had 3 years where they had the number 1 defense. So my argument is that the Steelers always had a better team. They're a better organization. Like I don't think there's any question about that. And when the Giants made the Super Bowl, that was mostly on Eli's back. Like this wasn't some. Yes, the defense played a great game against the Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. I understand that, but they also played him again, and he beat him again. So, and you said you care about what they were at their peak. Well, in my estimation, there's no question Eli was better at his peak. 2 of the 3 Super Bowls Ben Roethlisberger was in, he didn't even play well. And the one against Arizona, he had a great drive at the end, but he wasn't making. He didn't that throw for the touchdown to Santonio Holmes was fantastic, but I think if we're talking about peak, Eli's better. I don't think there's a question about it.
Okay. I don't know. I just felt like Eli was more prone to just throwing a ton of interceptions, and just I don't know, just overall not. To me, it felt like Roethlisberger was more consistent.
Well, I think you could do more with Roethlisberger, right? Roethlisberger could make plays in more ways than Eli could, right? Ben's going to be able to run with the ball. Ben can get defenders off of him. And make plays outside the pocket, outside the structure. So that's I can understand that argument, but production wise, there's no argument. And yes, he threw some interceptions. Well, this is again to my argument that if you'd have let Eli Manning play with the Steelers roster, this wouldn't even be a debate. Eli would have won a hell of a lot more games. So the last 6 years of Eli's career, they didn't make the playoffs. I understand everybody wants to blame Eli for that. I get it. But this isn't the NBA. This isn't the NBA where one great player can just get you to the playoffs all the time. So I can understand that. I'm not disputing the argument that if you think Ben's better than Eli, I get it. But they're both Hall of Famers.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree. I feel like I understand what you're saying about their different organizations, but I just, and I know that some of this is narrative based. Just throughout Eli's career, he was never thought of as one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Roethlisberger there was a stretch where he was considered, one of the top 7-8 quarterbacks in the league. Eli was, you'd have weeks where it's like, oh, he looks really good. And then you'd have weeks where he looks really bad, and I just feel like the consistency was never really there. Roethlisberger had bad years. He had bad games. He had bad playoff performances. But, and my argument with Roethlisberger isn't even so much the fact that he's got 2 rings. Like that's part of it, but to me, that's not the main part of it. I just felt like Roethlisberger was much more consistent over the course of his career and gave his team a chance to win much more than Eli Manning did, So it's just maybe I'm splitting hairs, but I don't know. I just felt like it was the whole Eli to the Hall of Fame just on its face feels ridiculous to me,
Yeah, but
I feel like that's why, like, if you look, for instance, if I was to look at like Matt Ryan's career, granted, Matt Ryan doesn't have 2 rings, but I mean, he's got an MVP, and he's, if you look at all his numbers and you look at what granted, there was some chaos in his organization, but he's been able to make the playoffs a bunch of times. He's won a bunch of playoff games. When he got the right offensive coordinator, he was the MVP, and they probably should have won that Super Bowl if Kyle Shanahan had run the ball a couple more times. And then people are maybe talking about it differently. I just, I understand what you're saying about it was a lot of it was on Eli's back, them getting to those Super Bowls. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, you were saying what they are at their peak. Yeah, but if a couple things go differently, The first Super Bowl Roethlisberger was in, he had really nothing to do with them winning that game.
Yeah, no, I
So
agree with that.
so
I
we're
like the way he played throughout the playoffs, though.
Yeah, but we're gonna talk about. But Eli did the same thing. Eli on his Super Bowl run, they were a 6 seed. They barely got into the playoffs. They went all the way to the Super Bowl, beat the undefeated Patriots. Like if we're talking about a small sample size, like there's no to me there's no, it's not even a comparison. The two wins that the two playoff runs that Eli had are far beyond anything Roethlisberger ever did. Now, if
I,
you want
I,
to say
I think it's the consistency thing. I just don't feel like Eli was as consistent as Roethlisberger
right,
was.
and I could and my
That's the main thing.
right. My argument is I chalk that up to he got to play for the Steelers for his whole career. Like this is one of the things where I understand what Colin Cowherd is saying about him being an underachiever. It's like there's a whole bunch of quarterbacks who would have won, at least two of those Super Bowls. He only won two, so maybe not. They probably wouldn't have won the Arizona one, but I don't think it would have been that difficult. Eli, to me, what he did in those two playoff runs is beyond. He beat the Aaron Rodgers team that was 15-1 in the regular season. He beat them in a playoff game. You know, but anyway, regardless of who's better, the point is when you look at their career numbers. You can't make the argument that Roethlisberger is a Hall of Famer and Eli isn't. If you think Ben's better, that's fine. But there's no argument that one of them's a Hall of Famer and the other guy isn't. Get out of here.
They're gonna end up putting Eli in, but I don't agree with it. Like I said, they put Kurt Warner in. I don't agree with that. But I understand the point you're making, and maybe I'm getting too much into narrative here, but it just seems it's not only that I think Roethlisberger's better. I think Eli is borderline. Put it that way. Like I just look at his career and I just don't. I don't see Hall of Fame. I see he had some moments. He certainly had some moments where he looked pretty darn good, but I just can't. I can't really put him in there. It just doesn't. I'm not seeing it. So, but maybe I'm just seeing stuff that's not there. Or I'm overreacting to certain things. I just felt like he was. I just felt like he was. There was a lot of times he was just bad. Now, granted, he still threw 360 touchdowns or whatever. So, how bad can he be if you do that? So, I'm not saying he wasn't a talented quarterback who definitely had some moments, but I'm not really seeing it. But I think he's going to get in. Matt Ryan, I think that's going to be an interesting one. He might end up getting in. Stafford, like I was saying earlier, if Stafford were to win the Super Bowl and have a few more really good years, then you're going to end up looking at his numbers, and then in the Super Bowl, and then I think he's probably going to be pretty close to getting in. Everyone kind of overreacts to the Super Bowl, so yeah, they probably get in there. Do you think Phillip Rivers is a Hall of Famer? Because I'm with like.
I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a whole bunch of quarterbacks that have careers like the ones that we're talking about, and they're all going to be competing against each other to get into the Hall of Fame. So,
yeah,
my personal opinion, I think Rivers gets in because all that organizational stability we just talked about. Ben Roethlisberger had the most. Eli had a lot. Phillip Rivers had none. So, in my opinion, I'm putting Phillip Rivers in if it's my Hall of Fame. No, I don't think he's going to get in because there's going to be too many people ahead of him. But I think Phillip Rivers had less to work with than either of these two guys we're talking about, and he did a hell of a lot with it.
Yeah.
But Phillip Rivers, very similar to Matthew Stafford.
He's kind of borderline. There were some pretty good years there, and then I guess you can consider the organizational stuff. I don't know. I mean, he was considered one of the best quarterbacks in the league for a while there. So, yeah, I almost would feel more comfortable with Rivers over Eli. But I don't know. It's close to me.
I mean, you beat the Patriots twice in the Super Bowl. The Patriots are probably the greatest team of all time. It doesn't count. You don't get extra points for that.
All right. I mean, I guess.
Roethlisberger could never beat the Patriots.
Yeah. I mean, Roethlisberger didn't get the good fortune of somebody catching a ball against his helmet. I mean, so.
Right. I agree. They could have lost that game, but he got them there. Like they beat, they beat Green Bay in, sub-zero weather. Yeah. All right. So we could go on and on all day about that, but we don't have
But no, to put a closing thing on it, Roethlisberger, Eli, I think they both get in. Those other guys may be borderline, but I think they're both getting in. If you want my honest opinion. Now, I can talk about what I think, but I think at the end of the day, it may not be the very first time they're on the ballot, but I think they will both get in.
Gotcha. Okay, so we got the NBA trade deadline on Thursday. So I've just been doing a little bit of a look at this, just kind of pulling up the standings here. And so my thought on this is, I mean, I thought the NBA was wide open last year. It is incredibly wide open right now.
Yeah.
With all of the injuries to all these teams, I mean, so if one team, if the right team makes the right trade, I think there's 4 or 5 teams at least that are one trade. If they make the right trade and something happens, they could be, and I was thinking this yesterday, like there's literally, we're one injury away from having like a, Chicago Bulls, Memphis Grizzlies NBA Finals. I mean, this is pretty crazy. So first thing I wanted to discuss was Brooklyn, because we don't have any idea what we're getting from them. Durant's injured now. There was all this Harden stuff, the last month or so about he's not happy there. Now it comes out.
Idea that's been floated, Simmons for Harden.
Yeah, and now it came out that Steve Nash said that they're not trading James Harden, and James Harden wants to be there. So who knows what to believe about that? But I did think this was really funny. I heard somebody bring this up earlier today. If the Brooklyn Nets, like right now, the Brooklyn Nets are the 6th seed. If they play the Toronto Raptors, right now the Toronto Raptors are 7th. So it's not likely they would actually play in a first round series. But if they play in a play-in tournament, Kyrie wouldn't be able to play, whether it's in a play-in tournament or in a series, because he can't play in the home games in Brooklyn and he can't play in Canada. So if the one thing if Brooklyn is going to do whatever they have to do to avoid having to play the Toronto Raptors. So I just thought that really cracked me up. And then just to, you know how we love Kyrie Irving on this podcast. Kyrie Irving said, we just need to work on our championship habits.
You tell them. Yeah, that's okay. What are championship habits, Kyrie? Let me know.
The consummate professional that Kyrie Irving is, and the great leader of men that Kyrie Irving is, wow, amazing. It's unbelievable. I think the reporters who cover that team must just be like overjoyed when Kyrie is at a press conference, because they know they're going to get something. They don't even have to really ask a good question. It's just, hey, Kyrie, what do you think about whatever? It doesn't even matter. So yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of teams have a shot. I'm gonna list these teams. You stop me when you hear one you don't think has a shot at the title. I'm gonna say Chicago Bulls, Miami Heat, Milwaukee Bucks, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Phoenix, Golden State, Memphis. I really want to throw Dallas or Utah in there, but I don't know that I can. And so,
what's wrong with Utah?
Well, they've been really struggling lately, and Gobert's out. But yeah, I guess you can throw them in. Utah.
Ingles got hurt.
Right.
He's done.
Utah, but Dallas, if Dallas makes a trade, the Clippers just made a trade to get Norman Powell and Robert Covington. And so, and we don't know. Obviously, we don't know if Kawhi is going to come back.
Right.
Paul George is out right now with a shoulder injury, so we'll have to see how that goes. I mean, they would need to get everybody back, but if they got into the playoffs and they had Kawhi and Paul George, they would be kind of scary. Like that's not a team. That's not somebody I would want to play. Now, from what I've seen, there's no really big pieces, major players that are really going to probably be traded. I don't think Ben Simmons is going to happen. Um, Philadelphia, it's really unfortunate for the team and the fans because if they made the right trade, they really would have a shot.
Yeah.
The way Embiid is playing like the MVP. So, yeah, I don't think so. Ben Simmons, James Harden, and Bradley Beal. I don't think any of them are going to be moved because I think stuff could happen in the offseason with them, but I don't think anything major is going to happen. Um, so, yeah, so I think any team makes the right trade. So, let's see, what team should we talk about? You know, I don't know that there's a trade for the Miami Heat to make, but if they could add a piece, I mean, honestly, it's like I'm saying these teams need to trade to add something, but if anybody on the Bucks gets hurt, and we've got the guys on the Nets are already injured or can't play certain games, so you tell me what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So all right, I'm just going to go with teams that I like. I mean, obviously, I like Milwaukee because they basically
Yeah.
have their same team.
Priscilla was talking about them. They haven't been playing as well as they did last year. I forget what it was like. He was talking about their plus minus when they have Drew Holiday, Middleton, and Giannis on the floor at the same time is not as good as it was. Or maybe it was points per 100 possessions. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, they're not as good as they were last year statistically. I mean, still they could win the East. I mean, because it's not like there's anyone in the East who's like this world beating team. I mean, Brooklyn. The idea of Brooklyn on paper is better than what it's actually been on the court. Because they haven't been able to put it all together. So
Yeah, and I mean, you get into a playoff series and you got to play against Philadelphia with Joel Embiid. I mean, that's a tough deal, and especially with Milwaukee, they don't have Brook Lopez, and I don't know that he's going to be back the rest of the season. They're going to have a serious issue.
yeah,
That's going to be a serious problem. So it may just come down to who gets healthy. So Karis LeVert got traded from Indiana to Cleveland. So Cleveland needed a wing scorer, and they got one now. So now they've got an interesting young team. I think they don't have the playoff experience probably necessary. I was reading some of these rumors. So Dennis Schroeder is being rumored. Has interest from the Chicago Bulls and the Milwaukee Bucks, which would be an interesting addition to either one of those teams. I think the Bucks probably need him more, but he's on a pretty cheap contract. So I'm going to read off some of the players that could move that there's been a bunch of rumors about. You tell me who you want to talk about. So we got Miles Turner and Domantas Sabonis from Indiana, John Collins and Kevin Huerter from Atlanta, Dennis Schroeder I just brought up, C.J. McCollum, because Portland is now trying to kind of dumping people. So C.J. McCollum is out there available. Also, their center, Yusuf Nurkic, Jalen Brunson from Dallas, Jeremy Grant from the Pistons, Eric Gordon from Houston, and Buddy Hield from Sacramento. I just wrote down the names that I thought would be interesting guys. And
yeah. No, those all sound interesting.
yeah,
Any of those people in the right situation could be a difference maker for any of those teams.
yeah. I don't think Indiana's going to make a move because Miles Turner's been injured, so I don't think they're going to trade him, and I don't think anything's going to happen with Sabonis. But the C.J. McCollum piece, I find that fascinating. Like if you added him to the right team, like Dallas was the team that was really interested. That would really help them, obviously, and it would obviously really help a team like Philadelphia. If they would,
Yeah,
trade Ben Simmons. But the problem with the Ben Simmons thing, I think, is that in order to trade him, you're going to have to take a bad contract back. I don't think you're gonna. I don't think you're going to get. You're going to be able to trade him and get something you can get rid of back.
How many years are left on his contract? Like 3 years after this year or
Yeah,
something?
yeah,
Oh, God.
yeah. And Bradley Beal, he can opt out after this year, but he is not. He hasn't indicated that he wants to be traded, and I don't see that happening. But I will say this: if he does want to be traded in the offseason, like the best way to do it would be for him to opt in for one more year, and then they trade him to another team who signs him to an extension. So that's something to keep your eye on in the offseason. But yeah, I think there are 8 to 10 teams that could make some serious noise in the playoffs. This is going to be quite exciting. I can't wait to until after Thursday to kind of review and see who went where.
Right.
Because I mean, there's also a handful of teams that are probably just that have basically packed it in for this year. I mean, Denver, the Clippers, the Trailblazers, they basically just said, "All right, forget it. We're not going for it this year." And Atlanta is in the 10th seed right now in the East, which after
Right.
the season they had last year, that's crazy. So yeah, the rest of this NBA season is going to be mighty interesting.
Yep.
And let me just double check, make sure another move hasn't happened in the time we've been talking. And no, no, nothing so far. So I don't know. So yeah, obviously, being a Heat fan, I'm interested to see if they do anything. I don't know if they have anything to trade though. Um, that anybody would want. They don't really have.
Yeah, I mean stuff that they want to get rid of because their whole thing is basically uh their ideas will be greater than the sum of our parts. Because they don't have like a superstar, like just I'm going to totally take the game over player. Butler sort of does that from time to time, but he's not a top 10 player in the league. So yeah, it's all about all the guys contributing.
Yeah, they
So
don't, and they don't really have. They have all their guys basically signed up to new contracts. So, and I'm not sure what you're getting for a Duncan Robinson right now. I don't know that. I don't know that those are big um, moves on the market. The Heat just don't have. They don't have as much flexibility. And there's a few teams like that. Like the Bulls. The Bulls don't really have anything um, to trade right now. They used all their assets to basically get the team that they have. So
right.
they're basically set. They're basically set the way they are. Same thing with Milwaukee and Philadelphia. Obviously, unless Philadelphia pulls the trigger on a Ben Simmons deal, and yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if any of the teams that are at the top of the standings are going to make a move, but there could be some moves. It could be interesting, but it's crazy right now. Literally, there's a chance that Brooklyn and the Lakers might not make the playoffs.
Yeah.
As insane as that is, there's a chance that might happen. So,
Conference is all like
yep.
clustered up. I mean, it's not, I mean, the top 8 teams are over 500, but it's not, I mean, the Bucks 33-21, the Heat 34-20, the Sixers 32-21, the Cavs 32-21. It's like, yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I think an injury or two is going to probably have a lot to say about what happens, because literally, like you get if anybody on Golden State gets hurt, if you get, I mean, and even Andrew Wiggins, like if any one of their main guys gets hurt, they're not the same team anymore. Like
Yeah,
it takes away that edge of Phoenix. Like Phoenix, let's just go down the list. Phoenix, Chris Paul's going to get hurt at some point. Just depends on when it is.
Yeah.
You know, just what round does it happen? Golden State, if they lose any of their main guys, they're in deep trouble. You know, Utah, they can't have Donovan Mitchell, Conley. They can't have any of those guys get hurt. You know, Milwaukee, if one of their main three guys gets hurt,
Yeah.
you know, it's just I think it's going to be similar. I hope we don't have catastrophic injuries like we had last year. I hope that doesn't happen because that's really frustrating. But I do think that, you know, if you're in the top 6 or 7 in the East, you're going, we could win this. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, my big picture take is like I'm really interested to see but one team could make one move, one injury could happen, this whole thing could. So, you know, the NFL was pretty wild this playoffs. I think the NBA is going to do the same thing. So anyway, that's all I got.
All right. Yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Yep.
See you next week.
See ya.